Good evening, everyone. Welcome you all to Oncology Classroom. This month, we are discussing different topics on pediatric oncology, and today evening, we are going to have a lecture on pediatric germ cell tumor. This is part one of the topic, and the part two would be taken in the next week. To take this class, we have Dr. Renu Madan, who is an associate professor in the Department of Radiation Oncology at PGI MER Chandigarh. Dr. Renu Madan is alumnus of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. Thank you, Dr. Renu, for being with us. And may I now request you to please take over the session and start your lecture. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Dr. Dodul. So, shall I start now?
Yes, please start.
Okay, thank you. So, good evening, everyone. We'll be discussing pediatric intracranial and testicular germ cell tumor in this class. So, pediatric germ cell tumor are malignant cancer of germline cell in patients who have age less than 18 years of age. These tumors are rare but may present from birth, or it can occur during childhood or later in the adolescence age group. The annual incidence of pediatric germ cell tumor is very less. It is approximately 0.5 in 100,000 children under 5 years of age. It has bimodal age distribution. First peak is in infants less than 3 years, and the later larger peak in adolescent age group. So overall, it constitutes 2 to 4% of malignancy in children below 18 years of age, and 15% of malignancy in adolescent age group. So coming to the distribution of germ cell tumor, germ cell tumor can be gonadal or extragonadal. So extragonadal germ cell tumor are midline, and the site of extragonadal germ cell tumor vary with the age. So other than ovaries and testes, brain is the most common site of germ cell tumor, which constitute 21% of all germ cell tumor, followed by sacrococcygeal region, then mediastinal, retroperitoneum, and neck. So in intracranial germ cell tumor, pineal is the most common site of the malignancies, most common site of germ cell tumor, which constitute 50 to 60% of all these tumor, followed by suprasellar tumor, 30 to 40%. And basal ganglia, ventricle, cerebral hemisphere, and spinal cord are rare site of these. So the site of primary vary with the age, and in infant and children, intracranial germ cell tumor and sacrococcygeal germ cell tumors are common, while in adult, mediastinal, retroperitoneal, and followed by intracranial germ cell tumor. So this is the classification of germ cell tumor according to the tumor markers. These tumor markers, commonly used tumor markers are beta-HCG and AFP. And based on the elevation of these tumor markers, germ cell tumors have been divided into germinoma and non-germinomatous germ cell tumor. Non-germinomatous germ cell tumor can be again divided into various types based on the elevation of markers and histology. The common are yolk sac tumor, choriocarcinoma, embryonal carcinoma, mixed germ cell tumor, and teratoma. Pure germinoma usually markers are generally not elevated in pure germinoma, while they can vary in other histologies based on the type of the tumor. So coming to the genesis of extragonadal germ cell tumor. So earlier it was thought that extragonadal germ cell tumor are basically seen when there is a occult primary in testis or ovary. But later it was realized, it was seen that these tumors do not represent any occult gonadal primary, and generally these tumors derived from they do not derive from mature gonadal germ cell, but they derive from germ cell in the early stage of development. So these are the two theories which can explain the genesis of extragonadal germ cell tumor. One is germ cell theory and the other is embryonic cell theory. So according to the germ cell theory, the primordial germ cell, they aberrantly migrate to these various sites and undergo malignant transformation. And according to the embryonic cell theory, pluripotent embryonic cell escapes its normal development signal and progresses to development of extragonadal germ cell tumor. So this is pluripotent primordial cell. Normally, it leads to development of normal testis and ovary. But if there is if there is a lack of normal development signal, then it can develop. It can have various differentiation and can lead to development of various germ cell tumor at different sites. So this is the normal pathway for this primordial germ cell. But as we have seen that it can differentiate into various histologies and can lead to development of various germ cell tumor. So in children, other than the histology, germ cell tumor are classified into type 1 germ cell tumor and type 2 tumor. Type 1 germ cell tumor are those who are differentiated during the earlier phase of development, like this teratoma and yolk sac tumor. This differentiation happen in the early phase of the development. Thus, these tumors are common in the early childhood, in the less than 4 years of the age. And the other tumors like seminoma, embryonal carcinoma, malignant teratoma, choriocarcinoma, or yolk sac tumor, the cell differentiate into these tumor in the later phase of development. Thus, these tumors are not common in the early age group, but they are common in the adolescent age group. So type 1 and type 2 germ cell tumor. Type 1 is common in less than 4 years of age and type 2 in more than 4 years of age. So as we know, broadly divided into two types, seminomatous and non-seminomatous. So this seminomatous or seminoma, this histologically resemble early spermatogonia or even germ cell from development lineage. So if this tumor arises in testis, then it is known as seminoma. If in ovary, then dysgerminoma, and other non-gonadal sites, it is known as germinoma. And similarly, non-germinomatous or non-seminomatous germ cell tumor divided into embryonal carcinoma, yolk sac, teratoma, choriocarcinoma, or mixed germ cell tumor. Teratoma, malignant potential of teratoma varies with the age. It is generally benign in the prepubertal age group and malignant in the postpubertal age group. Now coming to intracranial germ cell tumor. So intracranial germ cell tumor constitute approximately 20% of all germ cell tumor and 3 to 5% of all CNS tumor. The incidence is higher in Japan, approximately 15% of all CNS tumor. Male are 3 times more prone to develop these germ cell tumor, and the median age at diagnosis is 12 years. Germinoma, more than 2/3 tumors are germinoma and 1/3 are non-germinoma. So coming to diagnostic workup and sign and symptom and diagnostic workup of these tumors. These tumor can the sign and symptom vary according to the site of the tumor. Patient can have sign and symptom of obstructive hydrocephalus or Perinaud syndrome, or there can be visual disturbance, there can be endocrinal dysfunction, endocrinal problem, or headache, nausea, vomiting, hemiparesis, ataxia, double vision. So MRI of the brain is usually first investigation which is done, and once we suspect germinoma or germ cell tumor on MRI of the brain, MRI of entire craniospinal axis has to be done, because approximately 10 to 15% of germ cell tumor, they do have a tendency of CSF spread. So then other than MRI of craniospinal axis, CSF cytology has to be done for malignant cells. as well as for tumor markers. Tumor markers are done both in serum and CSF cytology. And then biopsy, which is not essential every time. If there are raised marker in serum and CSF, we can omit histology and can start the treatment based on the tumor markers. So tumor markers are mostly elevated in non-germinomatous germ cell tumor, but this is not the case in germinoma. So it is difficult to diagnose germinoma without a histology. So these two guidelines have been given for the diagnosis of germinoma without biopsy by COG group. So it says that if the tumor is in pineal region or suprasellar with normal AFP level, and if the beta HCG level is between 5 to 50 MIU in serum or CSF, a diagnosis of germinoma can be made. Because in non-germinomatous germ cell tumor, usually AFP will be higher and the level of beta HCG will be much higher than these values. So if AFP is normal and beta HCG is only mildly elevated between 5 to 50, then a diagnosis of germinoma can be made. And similarly, the other definition also says the same. Here, the level of beta HCG is less than 100 milli-international unit per ml in serum or CSF. Now, coming to staging and prognostic factor, there is no formal staging system available for germ cell tumor, intracranial germ cell tumor, but modified Chang staging system, which is used for medulloblastoma, has been used. M0 to M4. M0 when there is no metastasis, M1 when positive cytology, M2 nodular intracranial seeding, M3 nodular spinal seeding, and M4 extraneural spread, which is very rare. So prognostic factor, one is stage. As we all know, stage is one of the most important prognostic factor, and other is histology. So we can see that 5-year overall survival varies with the histology. It is close to 90% in germinoma and 60 to 70% in non-germinomatous germ cell tumor. And thus the treatment of these tumor also depends on the risk group and risk stratification. There are different risk stratification have been used in different continents. So these are the two common risk stratification which have been used by European and Japanese group. So according to this European group, these tumors can be divided into standard risk or high risk. Standard risk is when AFP level is less than 1000 and age is less than 6 years, and high risk is AFP is more than 1000 and age is less than 6 years. And according to this Japanese group, it is divided into good prognosis, intermediate, and poor prognostic group. Good prognosis is germinoma, that is without any elevated marker with beta HCG negative. Intermediate is beta HCG positive germinoma or malignant teratoma. Rest all other histologies come in the poor prognosis group, and those tumor which having very high beta HCG of more than 2000 or AFP more than 2000 also come in poor prognosis. So overall survival also varies with these risk groups. In good prognosis, 10-year overall survival is close to 90% versus 70% in intermediate group, and 3-year overall survival is close to 25% in poor prognosis. So coming to the treatment option in intracranial germ cell tumor, these are surgery, radiotherapy, and chemotherapy. So what is the role of surgery in germinoma? As we know, germinoma are very chemo and radiosensitive tumor. So these can be easily treated and cured by radiotherapy. But there are few indications of surgery. When patient need any immediate symptom relief, like in case of obstructive hydrocephalus, or if there is acute deterioration in the vision, or when we are not sure of the diagnosis and we have to do the sampling, and sometimes second look surgery if there is a residual disease after neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So coming to role of radiotherapy in germinoma. So we know these are the highly radiosensitive tumor, and traditionally these tumors have been successfully treated with radiotherapy alone. CSI has been given CSI used to be given traditionally at a dose range of 25 to 50 gray. Excellent control rate was achieved. Because these tumors generally seen in pediatric age group having good prognosis, and CSI leads to a lot of toxicity. So it was thought if we can reduce the dose or the volume of the radiotherapy target volume. So what should be the optimum dose and what should be the target for external body radiotherapy, whether it should be CSI or whole brain or whole ventricle, or radiotherapy to only gross lesion, or is it possible to omit radiotherapy in certain situations like in children less than 3 years of age. So there have been studies which have compared reduced dosed CSI versus standard dose CSI. A lot of studies are available on this thing. In the standard in the standard arm CSI, 36 gray followed by 14 gray boost used to be delivered, and when it was compared to 30 gray followed by 50 gray boost, it was seen that reduced dose CSI does not lead to survival compromise, and side effects were obviously lesser in the low dose CSI. So it was said that higher dose of CSI can be omitted and CSI can be given at a lower doses. So now, as we know, CSI, these tumors are seen in pediatric age group and which are prone to develop so many side effects. So it was thought if CSI can be omitted and volume of radiotherapy can be reduced. This is without chemotherapy. So again, few studies have been done which have compared CSI versus whole brain versus whole ventricular or versus local radiotherapy only to the area of gross disease. So it was seen that risk of relapse when we are giving whole ventricular radiotherapy is not higher when we are giving craniospinal irradiation. But there is very high risk of relapse when we are giving only local radiotherapy. So only local radiotherapy is not recommended, and currently whole ventricular radiotherapy is standard of care in localized germinoma. In the case of metastatic germinoma, CSI obviously has to be given. So this is a dose distribution of CSI versus whole brain, whole ventricular or focal radiotherapy. So whole ventricular definitely would lead to lesser side effects as compared to CSI. So in radiotherapy, CSI is not required. Whole ventricular radiotherapy is standard of care for now, till now. Coming to the role of chemotherapy in germinoma. So it was seen that chemotherapy has led to excellent outcomes in testicular or ovarian germ cell tumors. So it was thought that maybe it is effective in intracranial germ cell tumor also. So studies were done. Studies have been done with the use of chemotherapy, and the objective of adding chemotherapy was reducing the volume of radiation and dose of radiation without compromising survival. So it was observed that addition of chemotherapy has led to excellent tumor response. Almost all of the patients had CR or PR, and thus there is a possibility, it was thought that there is a possibility to reduce the dose and volume of radiotherapy with addition of chemotherapy without compromising survival. So again, the studies have been done in various continents. So here 2 to 4 cycles of BEP chemo or chemotherapy with ifosfamide, etoposide or carboplatin was given. Various chemotherapy drugs has been used, followed by radiotherapy. Some studies have given only focal radiotherapy. Some studies have given whole ventricular radiotherapy, and some studies have used craniospinal irradiation with different doses. 40 gray was used in European countries, and in Japan, dose was used based on the response to chemotherapy, 24 to 50 gray. So again, it was seen that CSI can be easily omitted with addition of chemotherapy, but local radiotherapy should not be used, because local radiotherapy only, even if we are giving chemotherapy, leads to increased risk of periventricular relapse. So even if we are giving chemotherapy, the radiotherapy target volume should be whole ventricle instead of focal radiotherapy. Now, it was thought if we can give only chemotherapy and RT can be omitted. So again, chemotherapy alone is not sufficient to treat germ cell tumor, and a very high risk of relapse of 50% were seen when only chemotherapy was used, which was never seen with radiotherapy. So external radiotherapy is indispensable in current standard of care in the management of germ tumor. So again, studies have been done for use of chemotherapy alone in children less than 3 years. So it leads to very high risk of relapse of up to 50%. So radiotherapy has to be given even if the child is less than 3 years, but it should be delayed till he or she attains the age of 3 years. So RT can be delayed in these patients, but it should not be omitted. This is a recently published trial which has retrospectively evaluated approximately 200 patients who were treated over 50 years of age. And as we know, there has been a lot of change in the management strategies of germ cell tumors. So these patients were treated with a different treatment regimen with chemotherapy or radiotherapy, different schedules of chemotherapy, different volumes of radiotherapy. So in this study, it was seen that addition of chemotherapy does not lead to improvement in survival. So according to this study, chemotherapy is not beneficial, and whole ventricular radiotherapy followed by boost to the gross residual disease is reasonable without chemotherapy. So the current practice for localized germinoma is whole ventricular radiotherapy 24 gray followed by boost to primary site up to 40 to 45 gray with or without chemo. In metastatic germinoma, CSI has to be given to a dose of 30 gray if we are not giving chemotherapy, and 24 gray if we are giving chemotherapy, plus a local tumor site boost up to a total dose of 40 to 45 gray. And in children, delay RT till 3 years of age. These are some ongoing trials on the response-based radiotherapy dose in European and USA. In both the trials, upfront chemo has been used, and in this study, whole ventricular radiotherapy was used when there is CSR without any boost, and if PR, boost was given, and in metastatic CSI followed by boost. And in ACNS 0232 trial, also upfront chemotherapy was given, and even if there was CR or PR, boost was given, but the dose of whole ventricular radiotherapy was lesser if CR, 18 gray versus 24 gray if PR. So this is an ongoing trial, but the interim results are encouraging. Coming to target volume delineation for whole ventricular radiotherapy. So planning CT should be fused with the T2 weighted MRI. Whole ventricular volume is our CTV, and it should consist of pre-chemotherapy GTV, lateral ventricular, third ventricle, fourth ventricle, suprasellar and pineal cistern. Inclusion of pre-pontine cistern is optional, but it should be included if third ventriculostomy or if there is a large suprasellar tumor. This is CTV, and a 3 to 5 mm margin is given for PTV. This is dose color wash of whole ventricular radiotherapy, and for boost, pre-chemotherapy volume is our GTV, which is given a margin of 5 mm for PTV and 3 to 5 mm for PTV. Now coming to non-germinomatous germ cell tumor. As we know, non-germinomatous germ cell tumor, they do not respond to radiotherapy as good as germinoma. So additional therapies has to be given other than radiotherapy. So multimodality treatment is a treatment of choice for non-germinomatous germ cell tumor, and historically it was seen that radiotherapy alone lead to poor outcome with an overall survival of 20 to 40%. So again, then it because chemotherapy is very effective in testicular and ovarian germ cell tumors, so chemotherapy was tried in these tumors, and it was seen that if chemotherapy is given prior to radiotherapy, then there was a drastic improvement in overall survival from 20-40% to 60 to 70%. So for non-germinomatous germ cell tumor, elevated AFP more than 1,000 or residual tumor after chemotherapy are important. So current treatment component for these tumors are CSI, because they have high propensity for leptomeningeal spread. Chemotherapy, because high risk of metastasis. It has to be given, both CSI and chemotherapy both has to be given. And about the role of tumor resection, it is controversial. Although upfront tumor resection before starting chemotherapy or radiotherapy is not recommended, but it has been seen that if there is a gross residual disease after chemotherapy or radiotherapy, the prognosis is not good. So people have tried tumor resection after chemotherapy or after chemoradiotherapy, and they have seen that second look surgery after chemotherapy and radiotherapy leads to improvement in survival in these patients. So second look surgery has a role in these tumors, but role of upfront surgery is controversial. So platinum-based chemotherapy, as in germinoma or other testicular or ovarian germ cell tumor, is used, but again, different studies have used different chemotherapy regimens like ifosfamide, etoposide, various studies have also explored the reduced volume of radiotherapy, but the effect is of reduced dose radiotherapy is not as good as craniospinal irradiation. If radiotherapy volume is reduced, then it compromises with survival. So till now there is no role of reduced volume radiotherapy, and CSI is the standard of care. So these are two studies, ACNS 1123 study, which initially used 6 cycles of chemotherapy, carboplatin alternating with IE. And if there was a CR or PR, whole ventricular radiotherapy with boost was given. But there were high risk of high relapse were seen in spine, so the study was closed early. And later on, CSI was continued in this study. Similarly, in this European trial, chemotherapy is being followed by focal radiotherapy of 54 gray in localized germ cell tumor. But again, it was seen that local radiotherapy is not a standard of care, because 3-year event-free survival with local radiotherapy is only 72%, as compared to the 92% in ACNS 1122 trial where CSI was given. So there is till now no role of reduced RT field outside a clinical trial. So coming to second look surgery, I already explained that if there is a residual disease after chemotherapy or radiotherapy, it compromises outcome. So it has to be resected after chemotherapy, or according to some studies, the tumor has to be resected after completion of chemoradiotherapy, and some suggest after chemotherapy and before radiotherapy. So it was seen that 5-year progression-free survival was 85% when there was no residual versus 48% when residual was there. So second look surgery is important. So coming to the current practice, which has to be followed in these tumors, multimodality therapy. that should constitute of chemotherapy and radiotherapy should include CSI and a tumor boost. Second look surgery should be done whenever residual is present. Now coming to intracranial teratoma, so we all know it can be mature, immature, or teratoma with malignant transformation. Teratoma with malignant transformation are treated as other germ cell tumor, other malignant germ cell tumor. For mature teratoma, complete resection or maximal safe resection is the treatment of choice. But there are no specific guidelines for immature teratoma, whether adjuvant chemotherapy has to be given or it can be kept on follow-up only. So these are issues with survivor, endocrinal, because these are long-term survival, so endocrinal, neurocognitive, and development effects can be seen in the long term. So now the second part is testicular tumor. So overall, genitourinary tumors are not common in pediatric age group, and testicular tumors are again very rare in this age group, which represent approximately 1% of these tumors, and the incidence is only 0.5 to 2 cases per 100,000 children. So bimodal distribution with the first peak in infancy and second in adolescent and young adulthood. Approximately 90 to 95% of these tumor germ cell tumor are testicular tumor are germ cell tumor. So histologically, they are divided into different types based on histologically and tumor markers, and there is a difference in the prepubertal and postpubertal testicular tumor. These tumors in prepubertal and postpubertal group, these tumors differ in incidence, differ in histology, and differ in outcome. So the treatment in these two groups are also is also different. So earlier, these tumors, younger patients with testicular tumor, they used to be treated in the similar way like in adult germ cell tumor, but later it was realized that there is a biological and histological difference in pediatric and adult germ cell tumors. So now different treatment is used for these two groups. So these are few difference in pre and post pubertal age group testicular tumor. So in prepubertal age group, benign testicular tumor are most common. Close to 75% tumors are benign in prepubertal age group. Teratoma is most common. While in post-pubertal age group, only 40% tumor are benign, rest are malignant. In younger patient, yolk sac tumor is most common malignant tumor, and generally these tumors are pure without any component of other histology. But in older children or post-pubertal group, mixed germ cell tumors are common, except for seminoma, but seminoma again is very rare in younger population. So prepubertal age group testicular tumor, generally they have 5% of them will have metastasis as present at presentation, as compared to 20 to 30% in post-pubertal age group. Approximately 85% germ cell tumor will be localized at presentation in younger children, as compared to 34% in older children. So these tumors are generally diagnosed early and have good prognosis, but in post-pubertal age group, there is a diagnosis of there is a delay in diagnosis, and the prognosis is worse as compared to smaller children and adults. The reason of delayed diagnosis is because the teenage group, they are very, this is a different group of population, and they need different emotional and psychological support. So generally, they hide their symptoms, they do not disclose their symptoms to parents. So there is a delay in the diagnosis, and prognosis is worse because the available studies have either included smaller children or only adults. So this group generally do not get the required treatment, the adequate treatment. So because this group is having poor prognosis as compared to the smaller children, but these are sometimes treated on the line of prepubertal age group. So this is a reason for worse prognosis in this age group. So coming to risk factor for testicular tumors, so there is no environmental risk factor available for these tumors. Mostly these tumors are spontaneous. Family history of testicular tumor increase the risk of cancer, and history of cryptorchidism increase the risk of testicular cancer to up to 15 to 50 times. Also increases the risk of testicular cancer in contralateral testes. And testicular survivors, they have increased risk of cancer in contralateral testes, approximately 30 times higher as compared to the general population. Then there is development or genetic etiology. So it has been seen that these tumors are seen higher if they have gonadal dysgenesis or Klinefelter syndrome. Testicular tumors have also seen in patients with Down syndrome. This is one of the common cancer which is seen in patients with Down syndrome. Coming to the clinical presentation, these tumors present with a painless testicular swelling or pressure-like sensation. There can be abdominal pain, or there can be sign and symptom of metastasis like back pain, shortness of breath, or there can be sign and symptom of hormonal changes like gynecomastia due to HCG overproduction or galactorrhea. There can be hemoptysis, weight loss. Average delay in diagnosis is close to 6 months. Coming to the tumor markers, we know beta HCG and AFP are the important tumor markers, and LDH and FLAP are the cellular enzyme. So the importance of tumor markers in these tumors is, one is diagnosis. So close to 85% of non-germ cell tumor will have elevated tumor markers. And they also have prognostic importance. Like if there is a high level of tumor markers after orchidectomy, it indicates residual disease. Degree of marker elevation is proportional to tumor burden. Then they also give idea of histology. AFP elevation is mostly seen in yolk sac tumors. It is seen in many other histologies, but it is highly elevated in yolk sac component. The change in level of tumor markers indicates response to treatment, and during the follow-up, increase in the level indicates relapse. HCG has a half-life of approximately 1 day, and AFP is 5 to 7 days. Raised level of beta HCG is seen in choriocarcinoma, embryonal carcinoma, teratocarcinoma, and in other tumor also. While raised AFP is seen in pure embryonal carcinoma, teratocarcinoma, yolk sac tumor. LDH is non-specific. It can be seen in both seminoma and non-seminoma, and it generally indicates tumor burden. So for the diagnosis, complete history and evaluation has to be done. Ultrasound of the testis is generally first investigation, and it should include contralateral testis as well. Then baseline test X-ray, CBC, biochemistry, tumor markers, semen analysis has to be done. CT chest abdomen, CT abdomen is generally done after ultrasound testis if it is suggestive of malignant tumor, and if there is any abnormality in CT abdomen or if there is any abnormality in chest X-ray, then CT chest has to be done. There is a limited role of PET scan in these tumors for diagnosis, but due to high occurrence of false negative result, but PET has a utility in evaluation of post-treatment residual mass, post-residual mass. Then other investigation like bone scan and brain imaging is done only if patient is symptomatic. So traditionally, radical inguinal orchidectomy was the standard of care even in pediatric patients, which is both diagnostic and therapeutic. But now, because we know that many of the tumors are benign, especially in pre-pubertal age group, testis-sparing approach should be used, which is safe and viable option for these patients who have normal markers. And if in this sparing surgery, which is only excision biopsy through high inguinal route, if frozen section is suggestive of any malignancy, then orchidectomy has to be done. Transscrotal orchidectomy or biopsy is, we all know, it is contraindicated because it will lead to tumor seeding in the aberrant lymph nodes, inguinal lymph node and other lymph nodes, and this will increase the risk of local recurrence. Now, coming to staging of germ cell testicular tumor, so different stage grouping is available for pre and post pubertal patients. COG staging is used for pre-pubertal patients, and because we do not have much data for post-pubertal patient, and it has been seen that these post-pubertal patients, they have histological and biological similarities with adults. So adult staging system, TNMS, is used for post-pubertal patients. One of the important difference in the biology of pre and post-pubertal tumor is that in pre-pubertal testicular tumors, they are generally not associated with intratubular germ cell neoplasia as compared to the post-pubertal or adult patients. So this stage grouping we have all of us have seen. T staging divided into T1 to T4 pathological staging. Then end stage can be clinical or pathological. Clinical stage is based on the size of lymph node, less than 2 to 5 or more than 5. While pathological end stage is based on the size as well as number of lymph nodes, divided into N1, N2, and N3. Then M stage is M1A and B. M1A is non-retroperitoneal or pulmonary metastasis, and M1B is non-pulmonary visceral metastasis. Then S staging is S1, S2, S3. Based on the LDH, HCG, and AFP level, these markers should be done after orchidectomy. So then, based on the T and M and S staging, it is the composite stage grouping is stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Stage 1 is NET. Stage 2 is again further divided into 2A, 2B, and 2C. 3A is divided into 3A, 3B, and 3C. There is no stage 4 in adult stage grouping of testicular cancer. This is the International Germ Cell Consensus classification for to prognosticate seminoma and non-seminomatous germ cell tumor. Seminoma are divided into good and intermediate risk group. There is no poor risk group in seminoma. Good risk group, any primary, any site, any HCG or any LDH, but there should not be any non-pulmonary visceral metastasis. And for intermediate prognostic group, if non-pulmonary visceral metastasis are present, it will come in intermediate risk group. Then non-seminomatous germ cell tumor, they are divided into good, intermediate, and poor risk based on the site of primary, whether retroperitoneal or mediastinal or presence of visceral mets, and the level of tumor markers AFP, HCG, LDH. So divided into good, intermediate, and poor prognostic group. So if there is no mediastinal primary or no visceral mets are present, and this level is S1, then it will come in good prognostic group. So if no mediastinal primary, no visceral met, and level is S2, then it will be intermediate prognostic category, and in the poor category, if either mediastinal primary or or presence of visceral metastasis, or tumor markers are S3. So there is a significant change in the 5-year overall survival, ranging from 90% in good risk to 50% in poor risk. Now, coming to testicular staging from COG trial for pre-pubertal patients. So this is divided into 4 stages. Stage 1, 2, 3, 4. Stage 1 is when the tumor is limited to testis and it has been completely removed. There are no negative, there are no microscopic positive margins. Tumor markers are normal after surgery. And in stage 2, tumor has been removed, but there is a microscopic disease in scrotum or spermatic cord, and if there is failure of tumor markers to normalize or decrease according to its half-life. In stage 3, either gross residual disease present or lymphadenopathy present. And in stage 4, presence of distant metastasis like liver, lung, bone, or any other site. So this is the difference. There is no stage 4 in adult staging, while pediatric stage grouping consists of 4 stages, stage 1 to stage 4. This is the composite stage grouping by COG, which is dependent on COG stage and site of primary. So now coming to management in pre-pubertal patient, that is less than 11 years. So age is a convenient cutoff, but ideally pubertal status should be individually checked for every patient and he should be treated accordingly. So in this age group, less than pre-pubertal patients, yolk sac tumor is generally the most common tumor, and mixed tumor and seminoma is very rare. So as already explained, that there is a difference in histology and biology with the adult patients or adolescent patients. So the treatment, there is a difference in treatment also. These patients generally, they have a good prognosis, so they require less aggressive treatment. So COG protocol for these patients recommend surveillance for all local disease and chemotherapeutic drugs. If it has to be used, the drug should be the dose of drug should be minimized. So as most of the tumor in this age group are benign tumors, so tumor excision with a follow-up is sufficient for benign tumors. But if AFP level, but if there is a high level of AFP, radical orchidectomy should be done without violating tumor capsule as in adult patient. If AFP is normal, then testicular sparing surgery can be done. Retroperitoneal lymph node dissection is generally not indicated in these patients. So coming to adjuvant treatment in stage 1 prepubertal patients. So 80% of these tumor present in localized stage 1 disease, and only less than 20% will relapse after orchidectomy alone. So after surgery, surveillance is recommended. Chemotherapy is an alternative for some, only some patients who have high risk like LVSI. No role of RPLND. So this is the evidence for close follow-up. These 2 studies, pediatric oncology group and German studies, have shown that even after close follow-up of these patients, 4 to 6-year event-free survival of 95%, up to 95% can be obtained, and the relapse can be easily cured with standard pediatric dose cisplatin, etoposide, and bleomycin, and a 4-year overall survival of 100% was obtained in these 2 studies. So according to these 2 studies, younger age at presentation, presence of only pure yolk sac tumor, and lack of LVI are the favorable prognostic factors for these patients. For stage 2 to stage 4 in prepubertal patient, surgery and 4 cycles of standard pediatric PEB is a common treatment regimen for these patients with an overall survival of more than 90%. So these are the studies by Children Oncology Group, which has seen that 4 cycles of chemotherapy after surgery in these patients is very effective, and in overall survival at 6 years of 94 to 100% can be achieved. High dose chemotherapy has also been tried in these patients, but it does not improve any outcome. So this is the difference in adult BP and pediatric BP, which is known as EB regimen. So in adult patient, bleomycin is given at day 1, 8, and 15, while in pediatric, bleomycin is given only on day 1. Rest doses are similar, and chemotherapy is given for 5 days. Now coming to treatment overview for adolescent patient. So it is treated in similar way, similar way as in adult patient, because we do not have any specific guidelines for these patients, and these patients have poor prognosis as compared to the pre-pubertal age group. So after puberty, most testicular germ cell tumor, they are associated with precursor lesions like intratubular germ cell neoplasia. So they have a high risk of recurrence. So testicular sparing surgery is not indicated in these patients, and radical inguinal orchidectomy with high ligation of pore as in adult is recommended. Chemotherapy and other adjuvant treatment is done as in case of adult patient, and radiotherapy is generally avoided due to risk of radiation-induced second malignancy. Now, briefly about seminoma. So stage 1, these 3 are the treatment options: surveillance, EBRT, or chemotherapy. Stage 2 can be treated with EBRT or chemotherapy. For stage 2A and B, EBRT is preferred, and for stage 2C and stage 3, chemotherapy has to be given. So for stage 1 seminoma, approximately 70% patients will have pure seminoma in this age group. Presence of 4 centimeter tumor size more than 4 centimeter or radiotestis involvement are poor prognostic. So the options available for treatment of this age group, this stage seminoma stage 1, are surveillance, radiotherapy, and adjuvant chemotherapy. So after surveillance, it has been seen that although risk of relapse was close to 20% over a 15-year period, but this relapse was easily managed with either radiotherapy or chemotherapy, and an overall survival at 15 years of 100% was obtained. So surveillance is a good option for these patients. So the advantage is safe, avoid unnecessary treatment in many patients, and it does not compromise the cure. But the disadvantage is patients' compliance is a problem, because most of these patients, they will relapse in retroperitoneal region. So frequent CT or imaging has to be done, because clinical examination will not detect the retroperitoneal recurrence. These tumors have a tendency to relapse even beyond 5 years, so a longer follow-up is required than post. Risk of radiation with frequent CT, and there is a risk of advanced disease at relapse. Now the second option for seminoma stage 1 is radiotherapy. Radiotherapy reduces the recurrence rate from 20% to 4%, and there is also lesser need of CT scan and lesser cost of these imaging during the follow-up. But the problem with radiotherapy is higher risk of second malignant neoplasm, especially in children, like GI or GU cancer at 20 years. So these 3 techniques have been traditionally used in adult, although no clear role of radiotherapy in adolescent patient, but I will briefly discuss it. So these are para-aortic radiation, which is currently used for stage 1 seminoma in adult patient, and Dogleg technique and inverted Byfield technique. So initially it was treated with Dogleg field. In Dogleg field, para-aortic and ipsilateral pelvic lymph nodes are treated. But then later in MRC trial, para-aortic, it was seen that in the group in those patients who were kept on only surveillance, the common site of recurrence was only para-aortic. So they compared para-aortic radiotherapy with dog-leg field radiotherapy. So it was seen that para-aortic radiotherapy is non-inferior to dog-leg radiotherapy in stage 1 seminoma, and a dose of 30 grain 15 fraction was given for para-aortic radiotherapy. So later, because these patients will survive for a longer time, and they have they will be having side effects of radiotherapy toxicity. So in the later MRC trial, the dose of para-aortic radiotherapy was reduced from 30 gray in 15 fraction to 20 gray in 10 fraction, and it was seen that no significant difference in rate of effect. So currently, if para-aortic radiotherapy is to be given for stage 1 seminoma, 20 gray in 10 fraction is the dose which is being used. So the traditional field, the traditional target volume for radiotherapy when para-aortic radiation was given, it was the upper border was at T10 to T11. So, but in a recent 2013 study that was mapping pattern of nodal metastasis in seminoma, it was seen that more than 99% node were detected inferior to T12 or L1. So the trial was conducted where the upper border of para-aortic radiotherapy was reduced from T10-11 to T11-12, and it was seen that there was no difference in relapse-free survival, but there was definitely a median reduction in the radiotherapy volume of 16%. So coming to radiotherapy planning, so it should be done after healing of orchiectomy wound. Sperm banking and semen analysis, if it is required, should be done before any chemotherapy or radiotherapy. Planning CT should be done as in all cases. Scrotal shield should be used except in those cases where bilateral orchidectomy has been conducted. And if a patient has undergone previous pelvic surgery, then the scar of that surgery has to be taken along with ipsilateral iliac and inguinal lymph node, because this surgery might have disrupt the lymphatics. So for para-aortic radiotherapy, traditionally it is a 10 centimeter wide field, and the upper border traditionally was lower border of T10, but as later on it was seen that most of the lymph nodes were at the level below T12. So now the superior border for para-aortic radiotherapy is recommended at T11, T12, and lower border at inferior border of L5. Lateral border should compass entire transverse process of the vertebra. Ipsilateral inclusion of renal hilum of left side testicular tumor, which was earlier recommended, is optional now. And normal kidney and other organs should be protected as much as possible. This was the bony, based on the bony anatomy. Coming to the vascular based radiotherapy planning for para-aortic radiotherapy. So for this, nodal CTV includes paracaval, precaval, and intra-aortocaval lymph nodes. And to include these lymph nodes, we'll have to contour IVC and aorta separately from 2 centimeter below the upper margin of kidney till the point where these blood vessels end. So after contouring these vessels, CTV has to be delineated, and for CTV, 1.2 centimeter expansion is given, should be given for inferior vena cava, and 1.9 centimeter for aorta, and bowel and bone should be excluded, and then a margin of PTV should be given 1 to 1.5 centimeter based on the institution practice. So this is para-aortic. Dog-leg field, which is currently used in stage 1 seminoma only when there is a scrotal violation or previous inguinal or scrotal surgery or any history of distorted lymphatics, or in stage 2 and stage 2B seminoma if treated with radiotherapy. So again, in dog-leg field, para-aortic and ipsilateral ipsilateral pelvic lymph nodes are treated. So this is the traditional field borders of dog-leg field: upper border at T10-11 and lower border at upper border of obturator foramen. But then it was seen in the later studies that if the margin is the lower margin is reduced from upper border of obturator foramen to the acetabulum, there is no difference in the pattern of recurrence and pattern of relapse and overall overall outcome. So now this modified dog-leg field is used when stage 2 seminoma are treated with radiotherapy. And for modified dog-leg field, the superior border should be kept at lower border of T11 and inferior border at top of acetabulum. This is for dog-leg field. And for vascular based planning for modified dog-leg field, para-aortic area is contoured in the similar way as we have already seen. And for ipsilateral iliac lymph node contouring, these vessels are contoured. Ipsilateral common iliac external and proximal internal iliac arteries and vein are contoured till the upper border of acetabulum, and a margin of 1.2 centimeter is given for CTV. Then the margin of PTV, margin of 1 to 1.5 centimeter should be given for PTV, and then these two volumes should be combined. And if any, definitely if we are giving for stage 2, there will be a gross residual gross node. So for this node, a separate CTV has to be generated with a margin of 0.8 centimeter, and this has to be included in this entire volume. So whenever we are planning with radiotherapy, contralateral testis should be shielded with this lead clamshell device. So because we know that 1 gray of dose can cause total azoospermia, although it can be recovered after 1 to 2 years, but doses higher than that, like 2 gray, can cause sterilization, which can be sometimes permanent. So it is very important to protect testes, and this testicular shield can reduce the testicle dose by 2 to 3 times. This is the doses which opposite testes get in para-aortic and dog-leg field with or without shield. The inverted Y field is only used when in case of bilateral seminoma, which is seen in 5% of the patients, where para-aortic and bilateral pelvic lymph nodes are used. Then adjuvant chemo. The third option for stage 1 seminoma is adjuvant chemo. 1 or 2 cycles of carboplatin can be used. There is no much data for 1 or 2 cycles, but whatever retrospective data is available, it has shown that 1 cycle is as good as 2 cycles. So 1 cycle of 7 AUC is equally efficacious as 2 cycles, and it is equally efficacious as para-aortic radiotherapy of 20 gray in 10 fractions. For seminoma stage 2, there is no role of active surveillance, and the treatment depends on bulk of retroperitoneal. Both RT and chemotherapy can be given. For stage 2A seminoma, that is lymph node size less than 2 centimeter, or borderline stage 2B seminoma with a lymph node size of 2.5 centimeter, RT is preferred over chemotherapy. modified dog-leg technique to integrate time correction, and any salvage can be easily cured with chemotherapy. For stage 2B, when the lymph node size is more than 2.5 centimeter, chemotherapy of with VEP 3 cycles or EP 4 cycles is preferred over radiotherapy. And for stage 2C and stage 3, good risk 3 cycle of VEP should be used, and stage 3 intermediate risk 4 cycle of VEP should be used. For stage 3 seminoma, chemotherapy is standard of care, 4 cycles of VEP for intermediate and 3 cycles for good prognostic group. So coming to the residual mass after post chemo, how to manage that? So if after completion of radiotherapy or chemotherapy, if the size of residual mass is more than 3 centimeters, then ideally one should a PET scan should be done for these patients, and if there is a avidity on PET scan, then that mass should be resected. And if there is no activity on that mass and tumor markers are normal, then these patients can be kept on follow-up. Now coming to non-seminomatous germ cell tumor, stage 1, again these 3 options are available: surveillance, adjuvant chemotherapy, and retroperitoneal lymph node, because they are less sensitive to radiotherapy, and the prognosis is not good as compared to the seminomatous, as compared to the seminoma. So this depend on the risk factor: lymphovascular invasion, presence of embryonal carcinoma, T3, T4 tumor, or embryonal. It has been seen that if lymphovascular invasion is present, there is a high chance of recurrence of up to 50% if patients are treated with surveillance as compared to the other treatment modalities. So regarding, so one option is surveillance, second is adjuvant chemotherapy, which is given when high risk features are present. So 1 or 2 cycles of VEP should be used. And then RPLND. So it has been seen in studies that 1 cycle of VEP versus RPLND, this has equal recurrence-free survival and overall survival. So he can choose either of them depending on the patient preference, risk factor, and the treatment he has received. So for 1S non-seminomatous germ cell tumor, high risk of metastasis, so 3 cycle of VEP should be given. So then for stage 2 non-seminomatous germ cell tumor, again 3 cycles of VEP or retroperitoneal lymph node is the option. So if the patient is having 2A disease with S0, so now sparing retroperitoneal dissection is a better option than chemotherapy. But if serum markers are elevated, then chemotherapy should be preferred over retroperitoneal lymph node dissection. If teratoma predominance, retroperitoneal lymph node should be preferred over chemotherapy. And chemotherapy should be preferred if positive serum markers, node size more than 2 centimeter, or multifocal or unresectable disease. So coming to treatment of advanced stage testicular tumor. So if they present in advanced stage, there is really not much difference in management of seminoma and non-seminomatous tumor, and they both are treated in the similar way. If it is good risk, then 3 cycle VEP. If intermediate or poor risk, then 4 cycle VEP. Role of high dose chemotherapy with stem cell transplant is not a standard of care now. Now coming to sequelae of chemotherapy, sequelae of the treatment, all the side effect of the treatment should be kept in mind, because we are treating young patients and they will survive for longer time. So we all know acute side effect of chemotherapy: nausea, vomiting, myelosuppression. Then there can be bleomycin-induced pulmonary toxicity, and there can be, among late toxicity, cardiovascular neurotoxicity and ototoxicity can happen. Then there is a risk of hypogonadism and infertility after both chemotherapy and radiotherapy. So sperm banking should be offered to these patients before chemotherapy or radiotherapy or whatever treatment we are providing him. Then adolescent patient, they need special care, so special psychosocial counseling should be is required for these patients, especially when active treatment is going on. Then there is a risk of second malignancy with chemotherapy, like etoposide. And now coming to sequelae of radiotherapy, so nausea, diarrhea, and there can be hormonal dysfunction, and there can be sterility when dog-leg, especially when dog-leg field is used. Long-term follow-up is recommended for these patients, at least 10 years for seminoma and 5 years for non-seminomatous germ cell tumor, because it has been seen that late recurrences are common in these patients, especially second malignant neoplasm, and cardiovascular effect are also seen in the late follow-up. Thank you.